Hi, this is Gary Goodwin, founder of The Stuck Creative, and welcome. This place for tips, tools, and techniques for getting unstuck, keeping on going, and getting something done at last. And welcome back to this short series on creative daydreaming for creatives. In part one, we looked at the basics. We considered why are daydreams important to creatives, and then what are daydreams say, how do they compare to visualization. Also, we addressed, unfortunately, the bias against daydreaming. What is that about, and is it important or not, or true or not? And the last part was, how do daydreams work? What's the big picture? What's the basic mechanisms in our mind and bodies that make daydreams powerful resources for us? With those basics behind us, now we can concentrate on how are daydreams constructed. Looking across daydreams of all sorts, we will see that there are common elements. In other words, they're building blocks. So let's go ahead and take a look at what are the building blocks of a daydream. Daydreams tend to include visuals, a visual element. And I've split this out into two. One is snapshots, a quick image of an object or a person or a place, or just a quick view of a memory. Beyond the static visuals, what I call snapshots, we have mini movies. Now they can be just a couple seconds where we're seeing something moving, or we're moving through a process, or moving through a location, or they could be longer, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, or longer than that, where we're talking to someone, where we're sharing something, where we're learning something, where we're doing something, or something's happening to us. The more that we go into our daydream, which may just start off with visuals, we can start to hear sounds, we can start to touch things or have things touch us. We start to use our other senses, and it begins to feel more and more real, much more engaging than just looking at something. We can have visuals, we can be seeing something, we can even have our senses, use our senses, experiencing that place or that person or that time. But on top of that, special daydreams invoke our emotions. We have a feeling tone. And the creative daydreaming that we're going to be doing, it will be probably a feeling tone for you of curiosity, of excitement, of optimism, of positivity, of seeking to explore. If we're really looking closely at what are the building blocks of a daydream, we will find what I call the body's engagement. That the body is feeling as though it's in the scene, or its energy is changing, either up or down, maybe even the heart rate is changing, but the body is not staying static. It is reacting and it is acting as it gets involved with the daydream and as it brings in other material, other memories of what it would be doing if it was in this situation that the daydream is showing it. The body is involved as well. We can see all these elements working together if we were to grab someone and say, have a daydream, and tell us everything that you're seeing and feeling and the body tone and so forth. Then we would see all the component pieces as they happen to that person. But something short of that, I found recently, and it occurred to me that advertising and all sorts of media, and especially writers and filmmakers, they're giving us a daydream all the time when they're showing us things like this book trailer. This book trailer is from Nick Bantock, who's a multimedia artist and worldwide known author.
I don't think my art is so much about traveling in terms of the real world, but traveling to those places that sit just outside our peripheral vision. There's no creativity without play, so I go into the studio and I play. When you work with lots of different materials, experimentation is the key. You can't know beforehand what it's going to look like. In fact, it's a huge advantage not to.
I think this trailer indeed captures the spirit and the feeling tone of what we're trying to go for with our own daydreams. Our daydreams cannot just be facts and figures, but they need to be evocative in that it pulls us inward, it makes us curious, it brings up other associations, it feels magical. That's what we need. We need to have daydreams that are lively, that grab us, that energize us. That's our goal. Whatever the topic might be for our daydream, we want it to evoke what we had before, what we need, and we want us to be energized in the direction of where we want to go. Bantock's work itself is a pretty good analogy of what we're doing here, and that is we're creating an artistic expression, a collage of things that are important to us. Okay, it's time to get more specific. We're going to look at the specific steps for building a daydream. We need to begin with an understanding of what is our objective? What is the theme for our daydream? Is it for maybe greater ability to problem solve, or to spot opportunities, or general inspiration, or persistence, or all manner of things you can use to increase staying unstuck and keeping on creating? Any of those topics are reasonable for a daydream. We just need to have it sort of clearly in mind so we can build material around it. Once we have our objective down, then we can start thinking through what are my building blocks? What are my mini movies? What are my static images? Do you have some music? Do you have some books on the shelf? Do you have some photographs? Do you have some video? What do you already have? Or maybe it's all memories. Collect those together and get those into one place, which is usually going to be a list or a shoebox or a digital shoebox. Pull them all together. I know the tendency at this point is to be thinking about, well, what are we missing? What would be great to add to this but we don't have? Well, there our energy and our time will be shifted to filling the gaps. I suggest holding off filling the gaps and just going with what you have now, practicing with what you have now, testing it out as in a daydream, and maybe what you were thinking about originally you may not need or want, or you may have too much material. So if you can, put off adding new things, tracking them down, and put that time and that energy into getting started as soon as you can with whatever you have, with daydreaming now rather than later. Most likely you'll have more than enough pretty quickly. So what we need to do, so we can make this manageable, so we can get to know it well and we can practice it well, we need to narrow down what your collection is. We need to narrow it down to, I would say, 3 to 4 items. Run these items, these 3 or 4 items, through your mind's eye and see how they feel. Are they going to be meeting your objective? Whatever you came up in step 1, do they achieve that? If you're looking for inspiration, or if you're looking for getting your mind concentrated on something, are your items achieving that? If they are, keep the list of these items. If they're not, then this is the time to swap them out, because what you're creating here is your first draft of your daydream. Take your first draft and put it down on paper. It's important to get it just out of your head and getting it into the real world, into some existence, and put it on paper, because we're going to be having you stick with those and work with those. So narrow it down, put a written word of what it is, maybe a few descriptors. So if it's an image of Somerset Studio, using my example, it's the magazine, get a crystallized view of which issue I'm going to look at, what cover, and maybe the action of flipping through. Specify it like you're doing a screenplay. Take your collage, take your screenplay, and now rehearse it for a week. Stick with what you have. Don't swap out anything now. Stick with your first draft and rehearse it well. 2 minutes a day for a week. that shouldn't be too painful because it doesn't take long. Plus, it's your daydream. Plus, usually they're around things that we find pleasurable or inspiring or creative. So there is no downside. 2 minutes every day for a week. Okay, for week 2, another assignment. Go ahead and make the changes. If there are things that aren't as inspiring or they don't meet your objectives, swap them out, try something else in, and come up with your second draft. Also, by now, you should have a lot of experience with how to do daydreams, what they feel like, what you feel like before, what you feel like during, and what you feel like afterwards. But there'll be more discussions about all of that in the next part. But for this coming week, 2 minutes every day of Draft 2. We will stop here for today. You've got the steps. You had basics in the first part of this, and there is a part 3 where we look at doing the daydreaming. How long to practice, what a session is going to be like, what to include in the session, and so forth. What are the best ways to practice daydreaming? And after that, in part 4, we began a whole series of actual daydreams to build, where I specify I think the necessary daydreams for creatives, and we talk about what's included, and you can build them out one at a time. But part 3 is the next place to go, so I hope to see you there. All these videos and more can be found at thestuckcreative.com. I hope to see you there as well. This is Gary Goodwin, founder of The Stuck Creative, and thanks for being here today.